My name is Irene, and at 58 years old, I thought I understood what unconditional love meant. Last Mother's Day was supposed to be a celebration of everything I had sacrificed for my daughter Madison over the years. Instead, it became the day she handed a $30,000 diamond necklace to her mother-in-law, then stood up to toast the woman she wished had raised her instead of me. What happened next destroyed our family, but taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Before I dive into this story, please let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button if you've ever felt taken for granted by someone you love. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this all ends. To truly understand what happened that devastating Sunday, you need to know the foundation of sacrifice that built Madison's entire life. I became a single mother when she was 15 after her father was killed in a head-on collision with a drunk driver. Those first months were a nightmare of grief, financial panic, and trying to hold our shattered world together while Madison processed losing her dad. I had been working part-time as a receptionist at a dental office, but that income vanished overnight when I needed to be home helping Madison through her trauma. Within 6 months, I was juggling 2 jobs, cleaning office buildings from midnight to 6 a.m., then rushing home to shower and serve lunch shifts at Denny's until 4 p.m. I lived on maybe 3 hours of sleep most nights, surviving on black coffee and sheer determination. When Madison's acceptance letter from Northwestern University arrived, I cried for 2 hours, not just from pride, but from terror. The tuition costs were astronomical, and even with her partial scholarship, we were looking at expenses that seemed impossible. That's when I made the decision that would define the next phase of my life. I put our house on the market. Our little 3-bedroom ranch wasn't much, but it represented stability and memories with Madison's father. Selling it felt like erasing the last pieces of our family's history, but I couldn't let financial limitations destroy my daughter's future. The realtor got us a decent price, and every single penny went into Madison's education fund. I moved into a cramped studio apartment across town where the walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor's television through the night. Those college years tested every limit I had. Madison would call complaining about the dorm cafeteria food while I was eating plain pasta for the 4th day in a row, because it was all I could afford. She needed money for textbooks, for lab fees, for spring break trips with friends whose parents didn't think twice about writing $500 checks. I sent her everything I could scrape together, often putting my own bills on credit cards that kept climbing higher. I had my own dreams once. Before Madison's father died, I had been 2 semesters away from finishing my art education degree. I wanted to teach high school students to share the joy of creative expression with kids who might not have discovered their artistic talents otherwise. Those dreams went into storage along with my easel and paints when survival became the only priority that mattered. Madison graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing and communications. At her graduation ceremony, watching her walk across that stage, I felt like every sacrifice had been worth it. She landed an impressive position at a prestigious agency downtown, and within 2 years, she was managing major accounts and earning more money than I had ever dreamed of making. That's when she met Lucas Hartwell, the 35-year-old CEO of a rapidly growing tech company. Lucas was everything I could never provide for Madison. Sophisticated, well-connected, comfortable, navigating the kind of social circles where people discussed stock portfolios over wine tastings. Their relationship moved quickly, and within 18 months, they were engaged. Their wedding was held at the Riverside Country Club, a venue that required a 6-month waiting list and fees that exceeded my entire annual income. I wore a dress from Nordstrom Rack and tried to blend into the background while Madison glowed in her $15,000 designer gown. The guest list included business leaders, politicians, and socialites whose names I recognized from the society pages of the newspaper. But what really changed the dynamic of our family was Lucas's mother, Patricia Hartwell. At 62, Patricia was everything I was not: polished, influential, and completely comfortable with wealth. She had retired as senior vice president of the city's largest investment bank, and her penthouse apartment showcased art collections and furnishings that belonged in magazines. When she spoke about her connections in the business world or her recent cultural tours of Europe, I felt like I was listening to someone from a different universe. During family gatherings, Patricia commanded attention effortlessly. She would regale everyone with stories about private gallery openings, exclusive charity galas, and business deals worth millions of dollars. Madison hung on every word, asking questions about networking strategies and investment opportunities. I found myself relegated to the kitchen helping serve meals while the real conversation happened without me. Over the past 3 years of Madison's marriage, I watched our relationship slowly deteriorate. Our weekly mother-daughter lunches became monthly obligations, then sporadic events that Madison would cancel at the last minute for business meetings or social commitments. When we did spend time together, she seemed distracted, constantly checking her phone or talking about people and events from her new social circle that I couldn't relate to or contribute to meaningfully. I started noticing changes in how Madison spoke and carried herself. She developed what I can only describe as an affected way of talking about elevated experiences and cultivating the right relationships. She would mention casually that Patricia had taken her shopping for investment pieces or introduced her to influential women who could advance her career. Each story felt like another step away from the simple, loving relationship we used to share. 3 weeks before Mother's Day, Madison called me with an enthusiasm I hadn't heard in her voice for months. "Mum, I want to do something really special this year. I've made reservations at the Garden Terrace for Mother's Day brunch. You know, that new 5-star restaurant that overlooks the harbour, the one with the incredible reviews." The excitement in her voice was infectious, and I felt a flutter of hope that maybe she was finally ready to acknowledge everything I had done for her over the years. "I've been planning something for weeks," she continued, practically bubbling over with anticipation. "There's going to be a surprise that I think will really mean a lot. You're going to be so touched by what I have planned." I spent the next 2 weeks in a state of nervous excitement. This felt like the recognition I had been unconsciously waiting for, acknowledgement of the sacrifices and love that had shaped her entire life. I decided to splurge on a new outfit, spending money I really couldn't afford on an elegant navy dress from Nordstrom Rack. I even made an appointment at a salon to have my hair professionally styled, something I hadn't done in over 2 years. For Madison's gift, I chose a delicate silver bracelet with a heart-shaped charm that I had engraved with, "To my precious daughter with all my love." It wasn't expensive by her current standards, but it represented genuine sentiment and careful thought. I wrapped it in tissue paper and placed it in a small velvet jewellery box that I hoped would convey how much this day meant to me. 2 days before the brunch, I stopped by Madison's house to deliver some old photo albums she had requested for a project she was working on. As I approached the front door, I could hear her voice through the slightly open living room window, engaged in an animated phone conversation with someone. "Yes, the jewellery store confirmed that everything is ready for pickup," she was saying, her voice filled with excitement. "The custom setting turned out even more beautiful than I expected. She's going to be absolutely speechless when she sees it. I can hardly wait to see her reaction." My heart soared hearing those words, imagining the thoughtful gift she must have planned for me. The next afternoon, I was picking up groceries when I encountered Patricia in the coffee shop next to the supermarket. She was impeccably dressed, as always, carrying a handbag that probably cost more than I spent on food in 3 months. When she saw me, her face lit up with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Irene, how lovely to see you," she said, approaching my table. I understand Madison has something absolutely extraordinary planned for this Sunday. She's been so secretive about it, but she did mention that someone very special is going to receive quite a surprise. The way she emphasized someone very special sent a warm glow through my chest. Even Patricia seemed to recognize that Madison was planning something meaningful for me. She's such a thoughtful girl. Patricia continued, stirring her latte with a silver spoon. Lucas tells me she's been working with a very exclusive jewelry designer for weeks to create something truly unique. Whoever receives this gift is going to feel incredibly honored. I nodded, trying to contain my excitement, while maintaining appropriate modesty about what was clearly going to be a significant gesture of love and appreciation. Friday evening, Lucas called to go over the final details for Sunday's reservation. We've arranged for a private section of the restaurant, he explained in his usual formal tone. Madison wanted to ensure we had the perfect atmosphere for what she has planned. The setting needs to be just right for properly expressing this level of gratitude and recognition. I hung up the phone feeling more excited about Mother's Day than I had in years. All the pieces seemed to be falling into place for what would clearly be a celebration of our relationship and an acknowledgement of everything I had given to make her success possible. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely appreciated and valued by my daughter. Sunday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine streaming through my small apartment windows, and I took extra care getting ready for what I anticipated would be one of the most meaningful days in recent memory. I applied makeup with slightly trembling hands, nervous with excitement about whatever surprise Madison had planned. The new dress fit perfectly, and when I looked in the mirror, I felt attractive and hopeful for the first time in months. The garden terrace exceeded even my high expectations. The restaurant featured soaring ceilings with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking panoramic views of the harbour. Fresh white orchids adorned every table, and soft classical music created an atmosphere of refined elegance that made me feel like I was stepping into a different world. When I arrived at the hostess station, I was directed toward a private corner section where Madison, Lucas, and Patricia were already seated. As I approached the table, however, I noticed something that caused a small knot of unease in my stomach. Patricia was positioned in the central chair, the seat that clearly commanded the best view of both the restaurant and the harbour beyond. Madison sat to her immediate right, Lucas to her left, while a single chair remained at the far end of the table for me. "Mum, you look absolutely wonderful," Madison said, rising to give me a hug that felt warm but somehow brief. "Doesn't she look lovely, Patricia?" But Patricia was already engaged in an animated conversation with Lucas about some recent business development, offering only a polite nod in my direction before returning to their discussion. As we settled into our seats and began looking over the extensive brunch menu, the conversation immediately centered around Patricia's recent accomplishments and experiences. She had apparently just returned from a 3-week cultural immersion tour of northern Italy, visiting private art collections and attending exclusive wine tastings that were only available to a select group of international collectors. The vineyard owner in Tuscany was a personal connection through my banking relationships, Patricia explained, gesturing elegantly with her manicured hands. These are the kinds of opportunities that come from cultivating the right professional networks over decades. It's really an art form, knowing how to build and maintain these valuable relationships. I attempted to contribute to the conversation by mentioning a fascinating documentary about Italian Renaissance art that I had recently watched on public television. "Oh, documentaries," Patricia responded with a gentle laugh that somehow managed to be both dismissive and condescending. "While they can be educational, there's truly no substitute for experiencing these masterpieces firsthand, with proper context and guidance from credentialed experts in the field." Madison nodded eagerly, as if absorbing profound wisdom from someone she deeply respected. "I've learned so much about appreciating art and culture just from listening to Patricia's Patricia's experiences. She has such sophisticated taste and knows how to access experiences that most people never even learn about. Lucas enthusiastically joined the praise session, regaling us with stories about Patricia's legendary business acumen during her banking career. Mum, Patricia revolutionized client relationship management in 3 separate departments, he said with obvious pride. She developed strategies that increased portfolio performance by unprecedented margins. Everything I know about strategic thinking and professional presentation, I learned from watching her work. Madison's face glowed with admiration as she listened to these stories. Patricia has become such an inspiration to me in my own career, she added. I've started applying principles she's taught me about networking and professional development. It's amazing how much more successful you can be when you have the right mentor guiding your decisions. I found myself shrinking into my chair, feeling increasingly invisible and irrelevant to the conversation swirling around me. When the server came to take our orders, everyone else was attended to immediately and efficiently, but somehow my request seemed to get overlooked until I had to politely flag down a different waiter to ensure I could order my meal. The topics of discussion continued to revolve around Patricia's sophisticated lifestyle, her influential connections, and her expertise in areas that highlighted a world of privilege and refinement that I had never been part of. Every anecdote seemed designed to emphasize the vast differences between her accomplished cosmopolitan life and my more modest working-class background. After we finished our main courses and were lingering over coffee and mimosas, Madison suddenly stood up from her chair with an excitement that made my pulse quicken with anticipation. She reached into her designer purse and withdrew an unmistakably elegant Tiffany & Company box, the kind that immediately signals something extraordinary and expensive inside. "I have something very special," Madison announced to the table, her voice filled with emotion. "For the most important mother figure in my life." My heart began hammering against my ribs as I prepared to graciously accept whatever thoughtful and meaningful gift she had chosen to acknowledge my role in her success and happiness. But then, in a moment that seemed to unfold in devastating slow motion, Madison turned away from me completely and stepped toward Patricia's chair. She placed the distinctive blue Tiffany box directly in front of her mother-in-law, her face radiant with anticipation and love. "Patricia," Madison said, her voice thick with genuine emotion, "you have shown me what it truly means to be a strong, sophisticated, accomplished woman. This is just a small token of my gratitude for everything you've brought into my life." My world tilted off its axis as I watched this scene unfold, realizing that I had completely misunderstood the entire purpose of this gathering. Patricia opened the box with trembling fingers, and I heard her sharp intake of breath echo across our section of the restaurant. Inside was the most stunning necklace I had ever seen in person, a breathtaking piece featuring genuine South African diamonds arranged in an intricate custom setting that caught and reflected the restaurant's lighting like captured starlight. The craftsmanship was obviously exceptional, the kind of jewellery that belonged in museum exhibitions rather than personal collections. "Oh my goodness, Madison," Patricia whispered, her eyes actually filling with tears. "This is absolutely exquisite. I'm completely overwhelmed. The design is so sophisticated, so perfectly executed. This must have cost a fortune." She lifted the necklace from its velvet-lined box, and the diamonds sparkled with an intensity that drew admiring glances from other diners throughout the restaurant. Madison beamed with pride and satisfaction as she watched Patricia's reaction. "I worked with their master jeweler for 6 weeks to create something truly unique for you," she explained. "I wanted it to reflect your elegance and the impact you've had on my life. Every detail was chosen specifically with you in mind." Patricia stood up from her chair and embraced Madison with the kind of deep maternal warmth that I had been hoping to receive myself. They held each other like mother and daughter, swaying slightly in their emotional embrace, while Lucas immediately began taking photographs to capture every moment of this obviously significant occasion. "The craftsmanship is absolutely incredible," Lucas said, examining the necklace with obvious appreciation and knowledge. "Madison, you really outdid yourself with this choice. The setting is museum quality. Mum is going to treasure this for the rest of her life." Other restaurant patrons were beginning to take notice of the celebration happening at our table, drawn by the obvious joy and the spectacular piece of jewellery being displayed. I sat completely frozen in my chair, still clutching the small gift bag containing my modest silver bracelet, which now seemed pathetically inadequate and embarrassing in comparison to this display of wealth and affection. The contrast was devastating and humiliating, my simple, heartfelt offering, versus this breathtaking demonstration of love and financial resources that represented more money than I had ever spent on any single item, except Madison's college education. Madison carefully helped fasten the necklace around Patricia's neck, adjusting it so the diamonds lay perfectly against her silk blouse. "It suits you absolutely perfectly," Madison murmured, stepping back to admire her handiwork with obvious satisfaction. "It's like it was designed specifically for you," which I suppose it was. Patricia touched the necklace gently with her fingertips, her face radiant with joy, pride, and what appeared to be genuine maternal love. "You are such an extraordinary young woman," she said to Madison. "I feel so blessed to have you as my daughter-in-law. This is the most thoughtful, generous gift I've ever received." Looking at the two of them together in that moment, with Patricia wearing a necklace worth more than I earned in a year, while being celebrated as Madison's chosen mother figure, I felt completely erased from my daughter's life and relegated to the status of an unwelcome observer at someone else's family celebration. As Patricia continued admiring her reflection in her phone camera, touching the diamond necklace with obvious delight, Madison picked up her champagne flute and stood once again. The gesture immediately commanded the attention of everyone at our table, and I felt one final flicker of desperate hope that perhaps this elaborate gift-giving ceremony had been building towards some acknowledgement of me and my role in her life. "I want to propose a toast," Madison announced, her voice carrying clearly across our private section of the restaurant and drawing interested glances from nearby tables. "To someone who has truly transformed my understanding of what it means to be a successful woman." I straightened in my chair, despite everything still harbouring some small hope that she might recognise the sacrifices I had made, or the foundation I had provided for her achievements. But Madison's gaze remained fixed exclusively on Patricia as she raised her glass higher. "To Patricia Hartwell, the mother I wish I had been blessed with during my formative years. To someone who taught me about refinement, sophistication, and how to carry myself with dignity and grace in any situation." Each word felt like a physical blow, striking directly at the heart of everything I had believed about our relationship. Madison's voice grew stronger and more confident as she continued her devastating tribute. "Unlike some people who seem to know only how to complain about their circumstances and make excuses for their limitations, you have shown me what genuine strength and achievement look like. You've demonstrated how to build a life truly worth living, how to cultivate meaningful professional and social connections, and how to present yourself with the kind of dignity that commands respect." The other diners in the restaurant were now openly listening to what appeared to be a heartfelt and moving tribute, completely charmed by this display of intergenerational love and gratitude. They had no way of knowing that they were witnessing my complete humiliation and the public negation of 23 years of single motherhood. Most importantly, Madison continued, her voice ringing with conviction and what sounded like relief. "You have given me the kind of guidance, wisdom, and maternal support that I never received at home growing up. the kind of sophisticated insight that can only come from someone who has actually achieved something significant and meaningful in their life. Patricia's eyes were glistening with tears of joy as she reached across the table to squeeze Madison's free hand. "You are such a remarkable young woman," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "I am deeply honored to be part of your journey and to have earned your respect and affection. You have brought such joy into our family." Lucas raised his glass enthusiastically, his face beaming with pride at both women. "To Mum, Patricia," he echoed loudly, "for being such an incredible influence and inspiration to Madison. We're all better people because of your wisdom and guidance." The entire table erupted in applause and enthusiastic cheers glasses clinking together in celebration of this beautiful moment of recognition and gratitude. Through the noise and celebration, I heard Madison deliver what felt like a final killing blow. "I'm so grateful that I finally have a real role model and maternal figure in my life. Finally." That single word, finally, reverberated through my consciousness like a gunshot, implying that the first 32 years of her existence had been nothing but an empty void, waiting to be filled by someone worthy of the title mother. I stood up slowly from my chair, my legs unsteady and my hands shaking, and walked deliberately toward the restaurant's exit, without saying a word to anyone at the table. Behind me, the celebration continued with increased energy and joy, but I could no longer hear the specific words over the roaring sound of my world collapsing around me. 23 years of single motherhood, of working multiple jobs to support her dreams, of sacrificing every personal goal and desire to ensure her success had just been publicly declared. Not just inadequate, but actually harmful by the person I loved more than life itself. As I pushed through the restaurant's heavy glass doors into the bright sunshine of Mother's Day afternoon, I realized that my relationship with Madison had just ended, even if she didn't understand that yet. The week following that devastating Mother's Day passed in a haze of sleepless nights, untouched meals, and a grief so profound I could barely function in my normal daily routine. I found myself replaying Madison's toast obsessively, analysing every word and phrase for hidden meanings, while trying to understand how our relationship had deteriorated so completely without my awareness. The mother I wish I had growing up, real strength and achievement. The guidance I never received at home, finally have a real role model. Each phrase cut deeper with repetition, and I began to question whether I had been delusional about the quality of my parenting and the depth of our bond throughout Madison's childhood and adolescence. By Thursday, however, something fundamental shifted inside me. The crushing sadness began transforming into a cold, focused anger that clarified my thinking in ways that heartbreak had not. I realized that I had been accepting treatment that no one should tolerate, and that my unconditional love had been exploited and taken for granted for far too long. I called my former colleague Jane Morrison, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who had worked in the same legal office where I had been employed as a secretary 15 years earlier. Jane had built a successful practice specializing in family financial disputes, and I knew she would give me honest advice about my options. "Jane," I said, my voice steadier than it had been all week, "I need to consult with you about recovering money that I've provided to family members over the past several years. Substantial amounts that were described as loans but have never been repaid. I'm talking about tens of thousands of dollars that I could barely afford to give in the first place." What Jane discovered during our 2-hour consultation changed my entire understanding of Madison and Lucas's financial situation. Through her professional networks and public record searches, she learned that Lucas's tech startup had been hemorrhaging money for the past 8 months due to poor investment decisions and a rapidly contracting market for their services. They had been maintaining their lavish lifestyle not through genuine business success, but through a combination of credit lines, family loans, and what appeared to be deliberate deception about their actual financial stability. The $30,000 necklace had been purchased using funds from an emergency loan I had provided to Madison just 6 months earlier. That emergency loan had been $25,000 that I had scraped together by liquidating my small retirement account when Madison called me in tears, claiming that she and Lucas were facing unexpected medical bills that their insurance wouldn't cover. Medical bills that, based on Jane's investigation, appeared to have been completely fabricated as a pretext for extracting money from me. Irene, Jane said, spreading documents across her conference table. I've compiled records of every financial contribution you've made to Madison's household over the past 5 years. Beyond that major emergency loan, there have been dozens of smaller amounts, graduation gifts that somehow became rent assistance, holiday presents that transformed into utility payments, birthday money that mysteriously became essential living expenses. The total was staggering. Nearly $50,000 had flowed from my modest income to support their lifestyle money that I had given, believing it would help my daughter during temporary difficulties. Money that had apparently been used to maintain appearances and purchase luxury items while I struggled to pay my own basic living expenses. Based on the documentation and the circumstances under which these funds were provided, Jane continued, you have strong legal grounds for recovery. These were clearly loans, not gifts, despite what Madison might claim now. Using your emergency money to purchase luxury jewelry while you believed they were facing a medical crisis constitutes fraud. She leaned forward, her expression serious. The question you need to consider, Irene, is whether you're prepared for the nuclear option. Pursuing this legally will expose their financial deception and force them to liquidate assets to repay you. It will also permanently alter your relationship with Madison, assuming there's anything left to alter after Sunday's performance. Friday afternoon, my phone rang with Madison's number appearing on the caller ID. Her voice was shaky and desperate when I answered, completely different from the confident, dismissive tone I had heard at the restaurant just 5 days earlier. Mom, please, we need to talk, she pleaded. I know you're upset about Sunday, and I understand that you might have misinterpreted some of what I said. Can we please meet for coffee so I can explain what I really meant? I've been calling you all week, and you haven't returned any of my messages. Madison, I replied, my voice calm and controlled in a way that surprised even me. I've been doing some serious thinking about our relationship and my financial situation over the past few years. I've decided that I need you to begin repaying the money I've provided to you and Lucas, starting immediately with that $25,000 emergency loan from last year. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that I wondered whether the call had been disconnected. When Madison finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What money are you talking about, Mum? Those were gifts that you gave us freely. You can't just demand them back now because you're angry about something completely unrelated. Actually, Madison, I can demand repayment, and I said firmly. Jane Morrison is handling the legal documentation, and you'll be hearing from her office early next week with a complete accounting and a timeline for repayment. I suggest you start gathering your financial records. I ended the call before she could respond, my hands steady and my resolve absolutely unwavering for the first time in years. 6 months have passed since that life-changing Mother's Day, and the transformation in both my circumstances and my perspective has been more profound than I ever could have imagined possible. The legal proceedings that followed my decision to pursue repayment ultimately forced Madison and Lucas to liquidate significant assets to satisfy their obligations to me, including Lucas's collection of luxury watches, Madison's designer jewelry, and their lease on the downtown penthouse apartment. The financial pressure I applied exposed structural cracks in their marriage that had apparently existed for much longer than anyone realized. Without the artificial support of my money and their credit-based lifestyle, they were forced to confront the reality that their relationship had been built more on shared financial ambitions than on genuine compatibility or love. Lucas's business collapsed completely, within 4 months a victim of market forces and his own poor decision-making that had been masked by external financial support from various family members. The stress of bankruptcy proceedings and the humiliation of their reduced circumstances proved too much for their marriage to survive, and Madison filed for divorce in early fall. I used the money I recovered from them to do something I had dreamed about for over 20 years, but had never believed possible. I enrolled in art classes at the community college. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, I sit in that bright, well-lit studio, learning watercolor and acrylic techniques, while rediscovering the creative passion that I had buried under decades of sacrifice and survival. My fellow students are mostly women around my age who understand the unique challenges of rebuilding your identity and pursuing personal dreams after spending years devoted entirely to other people's needs. Margaret, a retired nurse whose story parallels mine in many ways, has become my closest friend and confidant. There's a crucial difference between loving someone and enabling their destructive behavior. Margaret told me one evening as we cleaned our brushes after a particularly satisfying painting session. Sometimes the most genuinely loving thing you can do for another person is to allow them to experience the natural consequences of their choices, even when it's painful to watch. Patricia Hartwell disappeared from Madison's life with remarkable speed once news of the financial problems became public knowledge. The woman who had been so eager to accept expensive gifts and effusive praise apparently had no interest in maintaining relationships that couldn't enhance her social status or provide her with material benefits. 3 weeks ago, Madison appeared unexpectedly at the coffee shop where I now spend Saturday mornings sketching and reading. She looked fundamentally different from the polished, confident woman who had humiliated me at that Mother's Day brunch. Her expensive clothes had been replaced with simple, practical outfits from discount retailers, and the artificial sophistication in her manner had been stripped away by months of genuine hardship. She approached my table hesitantly and sat down across from me without asking permission, something she would never have done during the years when she considered herself above my social station. For the first time in years, I could see genuine remorse and vulnerability in her expression, rather than the patronizing tolerance that had characterized our recent interactions. "I've lost everything, Mum," she said quietly, her voice devoid of the affected refinement she had cultivated during her marriage. "Lucas and I are divorced. His business failed completely, and he's moved back in with Patricia to save money. She won't take my calls anymore, now that I can't afford to impress her or provide her with expensive gifts." I continued working on my sketch while she talked, not rushing to fill the silence or offer comfort in the way I would have done automatically in the past. "I've been thinking constantly about what I said that day at the restaurant," she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "About wishing I had a different mother, about finally having a real role model. Mum, you sacrificed your entire life for me. You worked yourself to exhaustion to give me opportunities that I took for granted." She reached across the table tentatively, but I didn't take her hand or respond to the gesture. "I don't expect immediate forgiveness," she said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I just wanted you to know that I understand now what real strength actually looks like. It looks like raising a child completely alone while working multiple jobs. It looks like selling your house so someone else can pursue their dreams. It looks like loving someone enough to enforce consequences when they treat you badly." I finally looked up from my artwork and met her eyes directly. "Madison, I've learned something crucial about myself during these past months. Love without respect isn't actually love at all. It's just a form of manipulation, whether conscious or unconscious. I spent so many years being grateful for whatever small amount of attention you chose to give me that I forgot I deserved to be treated with basic human dignity." We talked for nearly 2 hours that morning, more honestly and openly than we had communicated in years. I'm not ready to return to the relationship we had before, and truthfully, I don't want that relationship back. That dynamic was built on my willingness to accept less than I deserved while providing everything I had to someone who saw my sacrifices as both inadequate and embarrassing. If Madison and I are going to rebuild any kind of relationship in the future, it will need to be constructed on completely different foundations, with mutual respect, acknowledgement of my value, and recognition that love is a two-way street that requires both giving and receiving. The truth is that I'm happier and more fulfilled now than I have been in decades. My artwork is improving steadily. My friendships are based on mutual interests rather than family obligations, and I wake up each morning excited about my own life rather than waiting for validation from someone who had demonstrated repeatedly that they didn't value me. I've learned that sometimes the most powerful gift you can give someone is the opportunity to face the complete consequences of their choices without interference or rescue. And sometimes the most important gift you can give yourself is the recognition that your worth as a human being is not determined by how others choose to treat you. Some relationships need to be completely demolished before they can be rebuilt on healthier foundations, if they can be rebuilt at all. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between preserving a relationship and preserving your self-respect? How did you handle that impossible choice? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with your own experiences with family dynamics, or feeling unappreciated, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding your strength in difficult circumstances. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their sacrifices and efforts have value, even when the people around them fail to acknowledge that truth. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you teach people how to treat you by what you're willing to accept.